Hello, welcome to this episode of Conversations with UX Copenhagen. I'm very pleased to introduce Beant Kaur. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you are in the Netherlands, I know?
Yes.
Whereabouts?
In Eindhoven. So that's like in the south of Netherlands where Philip started.
Okay. And have you always lived in there in Holland?
No, I came here 10 years ago. And before this, I lived in the US for 2 years.
Yeah.
I studied there. And before that, I lived in India, where I was born and I grew up.
Whereabouts?
And for one summer, I was close to where you are in Norway. I was a summer student.
Oh, really? In Oslo?
Yes. No, in Halden. It's like a small town close to Sweden, the Swedish border.
Did you like it?
Yeah. Very much so. That's why I came to the Netherlands. Really? Yeah. So everybody told me, I said, I was studying in the US at the time. And then I said, oh, Europe is nice because I met a lot of Europeans in Norway. And they were like, okay, so first of all, this is summer. Norwegian summer is not true. And then they said, this is not Europe either. So don't come here for this.
Too cold.
Indeed. Well, I did anyways. I was nice. Yes. And I've been here for about 10 years.
Okay, I guess you're staying then.
Everybody keeps asking me that. And I'm like,
we'll see.
Well, and now it's been a decade. So it doesn't matter if I stay or I go. I've been here. So it's a part of
exactly. So. Well, Copenhagen's very nice. After COVID-19 is right.
Yes, it's on the list. Yeah, definitely.
Definitely. So, okay, I'm going to start with explaining a little bit about these conversations. They are the initial chat that I have with potential speakers for the UX Copenhagen conference. And I thought I would go live with them and share it with a live audience and also record it so that people could see what we talk about. First of all, to get to know what the content of the conference is. And second of all, to get to know both the speaker and me, maybe a little bit more. And I always find these conversations so interesting because they go in a million different directions. And I just thought it would be fun to share. And I think it's been pretty popular. I mean, they have a lot of views and downloads. So, so first of all, of course, I want to say that there's a code of conduct for UX Copenhagen, which of course also applies to these conversations. And UX Copenhagen is a safe stage for different voices to be heard. So, so we don't tolerate any form of harassment or discrimination. Just so that that's in place. Not that I was expecting anything. Yeah, and then I want to note that we will be taking a break from these conversations until January, and then we'll continue with one every other week. But then to everybody watching, please do stay tuned to either, UX Copenhagen on social media or sign up for our newsletter, which is, you can sign up on the UX Copenhagen website. So, Beant, you sent me a talk proposal for a workshop that you actually do, and it's about improving your listening skills. Will you explain a little bit more, please?
Yes. So the workshop itself is about, because I'm a user researcher and I've been doing this for about 10 years now, and listening is a big part of being a user researcher, and it's one of my favorite things to do as well. Before that makes it sound like I just sit quietly and listen. I come from a family where we talk a lot and we interrupt each other all the time, but we also like listening to stories as well. So if somebody's sitting quiet, also you'd be like, oh, tell me something, tell me a story. So, but I think in the past years, I like learning a lot. In general, I'm always learning something. So I've been thinking, what is it worth learning? Like as a user researcher to grow, what do we need to learn? And then I was reading this book by Yuval Noah Harari, The 21 Lessons for 21st Century. So he's a historian who writes about the future as well. So the writer of Sapiens and Homo Deus. And there he talks about different fields and how they will be in the future. And he talks about education as well. So he says that in the future, one thing we'll need to learn is flexibility. And there are 4 C's that education should focus on. So one of these is creativity, communication, collaboration, and critical thinking. So I thought if that's true for the rest of the world, that's true for user research as well, that we also need to learn all of these things. So that's why earlier this year, I started with writing on creativity, and then I created a workshop on creative thinking for user research. And then this ended up being the second topic on communication, and listening is a big part of it. And the idea behind, in general, all these workshops and articles or emails that I write is that I want to learn from fields beyond user research. Yes. And then see how that applies to us. So for example, for this workshop, I looked at social psychology, I looked at journalism, at a guy who did FBI negotiations. So all sorts of fields to see, okay, what could we learn from what other people are doing in listening.
That's really interesting. How did you get the idea to think about FBI?
So the way I go about preparing these is I basically order, I think, about 5 to 7 books on the topic I want to know about. Then I talk to some people, I have some conversations. I also ask people for recommendations. And actually so these alt UX are emails that I write. One of the readers, she said to me, you might want to read this book on negotiation.
And I will ask you to send me a link to that book, because after these conversations, I always send out all the links that, for things that we've talked about to anybody who's participating. Yeah.
Yes,
so
absolutely. Yeah.
So I guess you've got 4 workshops planned then, the 4 C's.
At least, yes, 2 of them are ready, and then 2 more. Yes. Yeah.
What do you think about, so your workshop is for people listening skills, right?
Yes.
Because the biggest thing right now is obviously designing for, for voice UI. What do you think about that? Would it apply in any way? Would your workshop apply to that?
That's an interesting one. Let me think about it. So the things that we talk about are actually about human responses or what makes humans heard. So in theory, good conversation or good listening practices could apply. So for example, one of the things I talk about is the type of responses we can give.
Yeah.
And how to judge if a type of response is supporting the conversation or not. And in theory, this could be used as a way, at the very least, as a way to see how your system responds to people, the kind of responses it gives.
That would be great.
So I don't think it will apply one-to-one, but I do think it would have some implications for that. Yes.
Yeah, because one of the big things is that, the listening skills of AI are very biased. And, it's all, I don't know if I'm generalizing now, of course, but, it's, if we say that it's been coded by a white male who's 35, then it's going to be very biased. So maybe this is something that people could apply to, get a little bit outside of the bias.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because so one is listening so that you elicit the right response, right? That's one thing.
Yeah.
So that you help somebody elaborate on what they are saying. And the other part is what's the meaning you take out of it. Right. So I think it can help with the first, but the second, like what do you want to do with this conversation and what you've learned, I think that you're teaching the system in, like you're building it in. So it can listen well. If it can't do anything with it, then so that's an interesting way to look at it.
That's interesting. One of the things that we're going to be doing for the UX Copenhagen conference next year is roundtables. So we will have, small groups where we dive into one subject, right? So what I'm thinking is it could be kind of cool to do a roundtable with you, and we've got some other people that are designing voice UI. Maybe we could put you guys together. I think that would be a really interesting roundtable, wouldn't it?
It would be. They might go like, yeah, our system doesn't need to listen to all of this.
No, but I mean, thinking about ethics, you really want the system to have, if you're designing a robot, then you want them to have humanoid competences, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
I think it would be really
Yes.
important.
Yes. I think it would be an interesting conversation anyhow. Like
Yeah.
where does bias live? Where all does bias live?
Yes.
And what do you do with it? Yes.
All right. This is going to be fun. So how long is your workshop normally?
So this one, I did the first edition at UX Oxford, I think last week, and it was 2 hours.
2 hours.
Yes, so I think it would be around that time, a little over maybe, but around 2 hours. Yes.
Around 2 hours. And was it online?
Yes, it was online.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. It's interesting, like all things that are born during Corona, being online is like the norm. Like I don't even get to say that, oh, it would be so much better in person. It's like, well, this is what we have. So it came up during Corona. So
yeah. What did you find that the interaction was okay?
I think so. So I was also curious, especially because this was about listening.
Yeah.
But from the feedback that I got from people, it was really positive, and they really enjoyed doing the exercises with each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes.
Wasn't it Gandhi who said something about listening? Like you're supposed to listen to understand and not to answer?
So I think a lot of wise people talk about listening. And I thought this was said by, or something similar was said by Stephen Covey, maybe, or the guy who wrote, Habits of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, or the other one, this How to Make Friends, one of these guys.
Yeah.
I always confuse them. But in general, like listening and silence, it's a big part of all spiritual traditions. So just yesterday, I was writing about it in the Alt UXR emails, because yesterday the topic was silence. So I think like in Hinduism, Sufism, Sikhism, Christianity, Jewish, Quakers, like all of them have traditions which involve listening or silence of some kind.
Yeah.
And also silences have different meanings across cultures as well.
Wow.
Like probably you would know that in Scandinavia, or at least in, for example, Finland or in Nordic countries in general, people like pauses are normal in conversations.
Yes.
In the East, where I come from, for example, in India, in hierarchical societies, staying quiet is also out of respect, even though Indians are not quiet people. I mean, we talk a lot, but there is like you would give precedence to somebody who's older than you, or etc., etc.
Okay.
However, Anglophones are uncomfortable with quiet. And also the Dutch people where I live are also uncomfortable with quiet. Because it can seem like, it's, I don't know, it's maybe disapproving, or that the other person is not agreeing with you, or so a response is expected much quickly.
That is so interesting.
Yes, it was really interesting to look at those meanings of silence. And then also, personally, like what does silence mean to each of us?
Yeah.
Because some people are really comfortable with it, and some of us are like, okay, so when is this person going to give me a response? Exactly.
That is so funny though. And I mean, I guess just making people realize that there's a difference in culture makes it easier to design, right?
Yes, or at least it makes you aware of it.
Yes.
To pay attention to, okay, so what is going on with silence here?
Yeah.
Because in business, of course, they also use it in different ways. Like Chinese negotiators are usually taught silence as a technique when dealing with American businessmen, because American businessmen are really afraid of silence. So it's almost like a negotiation tactic. So it's also, how you use what you know. You can use it in all sorts of ways.
That is so funny. So they use it like as a power kind of.
Yes, yes. And it sounds like, oh, that's you, but all of us use all the things that we know
Oh yeah.
in different ways. So
Oh yeah. That's interesting. That's
yes, indeed, indeed.
yeah. Yeah. I don't think I could use that to sell tickets to the conference. I don't think silence would work.
But what is interesting to try is to wait a beat longer or 2 beats longer or 3 beats longer than normally. Like try it out to see how it makes you feel and how it makes a person before you feel. That's
Yeah.
been interesting for me, yes, because I've tried it in the last few weeks with a friend, and I wasn't even consciously trying. I was just trying to listen. So, I usually write about things I want to learn.
Right.
So not to say that, I'm perfect, so I let me teach others. So I was just, trying to think, okay, so what is she telling me? And then she continued. And I was like, oh, wait, so normally I would just start talking. And this happens so often these days
Yeah.
that I'm just like, I'm thinking about what somebody said before responding to them, and then they continue with their thought. And I was like, oh, okay. So
Yeah.
it's also this, that looking at, is a pause, is a pause actually necessary in life? And it might be in a lot of places where we don't pause.
Right. Huh. That's yeah. I think I've been more conscious about it for the past few years, not that many. I think
Okay.
it's an age thing also. But no, definitely I've been more aware of listening to listen and not, not to interrupt with my answer. Because, if you're not listening to what that person is saying, then you're busy formulating your next sentence and, thinking about all these smart answers that you want to give. And instead of, being in the moment and listening, which I think
Yes.
is more important. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And I also realized that I was doing a usability test, and I have 20 years of experience now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I was doing it with this young woman who's super talented, but like she runs with 8,000 miles an hour. And it was so funny to see how, I would really listen, especially one of the participants was a bit older. He's like 65. And so I was just giving him time to answer, and she was like cutting him off. And she's like, yeah, okay, come on, let's go. And oh yeah, that's fine. We don't need to hear anymore. And I was like, yes, we do. This is what we're here for. It's so funny. It's so funny to see, to get a little bit older and then kind of have a little bit more, I don't know, hindsight or something, isn't it?
Yes. No, I like getting older. It gives you
Yeah.
ease with a lot of things.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't
Yes.
mind it at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a strange year though. I mean, I turned 50 this March
Oh,
on
congratulations.
thanks. But on the 10th and then on the 11th, the world like shut down completely. I was like, is this a bad sign or what?
That was an epic birthday.
Thanks. No, it's crazy. No, so I just tell everybody that it doesn't count because I didn't get to celebrate.
Okay. Okay.
No, but listening is really important, and especially for UX and for definitely for user research, right?
Yes. Yeah. And that's the other thing I wanted to touch on the workshop. And also, I think through all of this Alt UXR series, that we focus a lot on the craft of, user research itself. However, and I am a really content person. Like I was really totally interested in the craft of user research. So, but over the years, what I learned was that a lot of my successes, and if I count success as the quality of the product, like that's what I was measuring myself by, they actually came from having learned things around user research, like communicating with stakeholders, like who are you listening to? And usually user researchers are very good at listening to their users, but then they ignore the rest of the world. They're like, yeah, like because we're also tasked with this duty and this honor of dubious honor of being the voice of the users in an organization. So we think that that's the job we should do well. However, a part of our job is also, because this is special to user research, that it ends up bringing a lot of different disciplines together.
Yes.
Which may not ever talk to one another otherwise. And there to listen and to help people figure a way out together is like a bigger strength of user research. So it's also about listening not only to your users, but also to all your stakeholders. So this is why I thought that it was pretty relevant to talk about this, even to user researchers who are usually, pretty good at listening to users.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
But not the rest of the world. That's funny. I guess it's true. I mean, we do get all tunnel vision, don't we? Especially when we're designing a product, I guess.
Right, exactly. And then I remember telling my husband that I wish I talked to everybody and listened to everybody like I do to participants in the studies,
Yeah, and he's like, yeah.
Indeed. Yes.
No, that's true. Yeah, I always describe myself as like the link. I'm always a link between either, development and marketing, or stakeholders and users, or yeah. And it's always, I always see that whenever I'm doing whatever I'm doing. I'm working part-time at the IT University of Copenhagen, and there I'm linking the university to corporate life. So I'm always the link. I'm always like the networking, hub. Yeah. But I think that's because of the skills I've learned over the years with user research, especially.
As well, yes, I agree. Yes, this being between spaces is definitely an interesting place. Yes.
Yeah. So tell me more about the workshop in Oxford. How did it go? Was it good? Are you happy with the results?
Yes, it was. I was quite curious how it would be. Also, as I said, because it was about listening and it was online, I wasn't sure if people would be, comfortable or. But yes, because I got a lot of messages after the workshop saying how much people learned and how they enjoyed it. So I was like, because usually when I do these, I go in thinking, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
I learn how it goes.
Yeah.
So yes, it went very well.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Yeah.
Yes. And usually in my workshops, I also do, because I'm really into learning. So I'm very specific about what did we learn from this, so usually at the beginning, we set an intention, like everybody says, what do they want to learn? And at the end, they go back and look at what did they learn. Because that's the way our brain gets a signal that, oh, this is important. When you repeat, it's like, oh, this is important, because else it gets rid of everything that we don't repeat, or we tell it that it's important. Especially these days, we hear so many things, we do so many things. So yeah. So that was interesting. Although I must say it was different than the creative thinking workshop in a funny way, because with the creative thinking, it's like, oh, let me discover my creative self. And in this workshop, a lot of people came with, oh, let me repair the part of me that doesn't listen well. So I think the vibe was very, how all of us feel guilty about, oh, I don't listen well to maybe family, at work, I don't know, all sorts of things.
Yeah.
I can relate to that, so it's not that I'm above that. But it was just funny to see that the tone of the workshop was slightly different.
Yeah.
That was just that how the emotions we bring to a learning experience, depending on the topic.
That is really,
depending on how we think we are doing.
Yeah.
So that was interesting.
And what size would you think was a good size for the workshop? How many people should be in it?
So actually, because it's online, I designed it so that in the main room, I basically explain the concepts and the exercises, and then most of the exercises are done, if they are group exercises, then people do them in smaller breakout sessions.
Yes.
And that's also because, a lot of us don't feel comfortable speaking to a room full of, even if it's just 20 people. So that's why I break it up into usually groups of 3. Because 3 to 4, I learned, is also a good number for a conversation in general. To listen well and have a good conversation, apparently 3 to 4 is the size of the group. So I think a size of 3 is what I found to be like an optimum size, also so that everybody gets turns and gets to reflect. We had limited the number to 100. That was because of Zoom.
Yeah.
Because if you, depending on the subscription, with this subscription, you could have breakout sessions with 100 people. So I think that should be possible because in essence, other than me going over the concepts and explaining the exercises, mostly people would be talking to these 3 people.
Okay.
Which is the idea of the workshop, to learn in an intimate way and also to get to know some people.
Exactly. That's what, the conference this year was scheduled for March 30th. And since the country shut down, I mean, like on the I think it was the 12th, we were told, everything is canceled. So I had like 18 days to convert what I thought would be a live conference to an online conference.
Oh my gosh.
It went really well. I mean, considering everything, but it was quite, it was a different experience.
Yes.
But I found that one of the things that people really loved was actually interacting with other people in the breakout rooms. Yeah.
Yes.
So we're going to be doing a lot more of that. But it's funny. I was thinking about, the roundtable sessions where I would have one of the speakers and then a moderator. But I was thinking 6 to 8 people. Do you think that's too much for a conversation?
I think it might be. I have this, like, having done these series of workshops over the past months and with a lot of breakout sessions, I have a feeling that anything more than 4 gets too much.
Okay, well, thank you.
Because then people start to also with turn taking, like you are afraid if you're interrupting somebody. And also 6 to 8 people is not enough to develop comfort either. So it's more of a performance than a conversation.
Okay.
So I think it depends on what would you want from the conversation.
Yeah.
If the idea is for them to actually talk about, have intimate things, talk to each other, know each other, then I would say 3 to 4 is the group to go for.
Okay, thank you. All right, that makes sense. Yeah, that's a lot of breakout rooms then.
This is true. Yes.
Yeah.
Indeed.
That would be interesting. Well, does anybody in the audience have any questions? Feel free to, unmute and turn on your camera. And otherwise, we're just going to keep talking. Tell me about the UX scene in Eindhoven. It's pretty big, isn't it?
Yes, it is. So in general, design scene is pretty big because Philips started here. That's why I'm also here, because I worked for Philips for almost 8 years. And then about 2 years ago, I started as a freelancer myself. So it's a Philips city. So this is where Philips design headquarters are also situated. And there's the Dutch Design Academy as well. Then there's Eindhoven University of Technology, which has an industrial design department. So the design scene is pretty big here.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of tech companies here. So UX is, I think, becoming big, but traditionally it has been more overall like hardware, software, because there are a lot of device companies here.
Yeah.
Like ASML makes these machines which make chips. There are these companies making microscopes or trucks. Like really, Philips makes all sorts of devices, including healthcare. So yeah. So it's a pretty, I think, yes, it's a very, even though it's not, for the fact how international it is, Eindhoven is a really, like, I don't know, laid back city. Like you wouldn't know it that it's that international, and also a bit sleepy, I must say.
Okay.
It's becoming hip. I'm surprised. Like, I'm like, wow.
Yeah. Cool.
So yeah. But in general, it's a very, I think, very experienced designers and user researchers who've been really busy with it since the beginnings. Then, so a lot to learn from as well.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Are there any meetups?
Yes, there is a meetup called UXify, which I'm ashamed to say I have never made it to. But they do have very interesting topics going on right now. It's UX meets sustainability, I think.
Oh, that's
yes. And so I think they do a lot of interesting things. But there are also a lot of things around innovation where they do end up talking about design and research, and so there are a lot of innovation cafes like meetups. Yeah,
Innovation cafes.
Yeah, there's like, it's called, so it's an evening, like a Thursday evening, I think it's called an innovation cafe. And then because there's also a startup scene here now. So a lot of people who are into startups or funding them, or they come and either talk or listen to each other on innovation.
Yeah.
There's also an art and tech society, which brings together art and technology. On socially relevant issues. So like there are very different angles on design and research here.
Right.
Yeah.
And okay, and then I was thinking about the theme for the conference. I call it commoning, deriving from the term commons, which is actually from British agriculture from years and years ago, where you know, people would go together and like use the land and use each other's resources in the best ways. And you know, it's kind of like these days we're developing things like Uber, where, you know, we're sharing driving, we're sharing tools, we're sharing office spaces, and, you know, everything. So kind of trying to, the theme that I was trying to work for is like the shared economy, and how we can use each other's resources best, and how we can share. What do you think about that?
I think that's almost like now that I see it happening, I'm like, how come it took us so long to get to this? Right?
Right.
So in our neighborhood, so we don't have a car. We have a car sharing program, which my husband helped set up. So it's 2 cars from and we have 15 families sharing. And I don't know, that's almost like the norm for me. So I can't imagine why would we have a car, you know, and especially 2 cars on top of that. Like when you live in the middle of the city, I mean. So of course, location does play a role here. But so I think that's definitely the way we should be going. And I think I'm totally influenced by living around people who are, so my husband is working in sustainability. So, you know, it's like I'm around that all the time. So in any case, if I have another view, that's not a good sign for our relationship, I think.
Maybe we should have him on stage as well. No, but that's exactly where, you know, I mean, my dream would be for people, for that to be the norm for people. You know, why would I own a car? I can just, you know, do something on a smartphone or whatever, and the car is available to me, right? Or a tool, a power tool, or, you know, a book, or
exactly. Yes. That. Yeah, indeed. Yes. So really, I think it's a really nice culture as well. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. What other initiatives do you see in the Netherlands?
So I see, like, this is, I think, this is since before, that people have these small libraries outside their house sometimes, where they put books to take and to leave. And there's just like a little library sometimes outside the house. I think, okay, so bikes, there's like illegal commoning of bikes, I would say, because I think, so it's a country of bikes, and a lot of students think all bikes are their bikes. So your bike may not be there when you come back to it. So you have to have a bit of a philosophical attitude towards having a bike here. This ownership of, you know, do you own this bike?
See, that's not the kind of commoning that I want to go. We also have this joke here that if you own a scooter, like, you know, if you're a teenage boy and you own a scooter, there's like always one complete scooter in different parts, like traveling around the city, that, you know, kind of get picked.
Right, exactly. Yes.
That's not what we want to talk about.
But also, I think, like, this tradition of patents, you know, shared patents in design, which has been there for a long time, or open source software.
Yeah.
It's interesting that tradition has gone on way longer in the digital world, and we are only starting to see this in the material world, like in tangible world of tangible things. So I think there's a lot of learning there from, what could you learn from places where this has been going on forever.
It's funny that you say that it took us so long to get there, because I mean, didn't we kind of start with sharing everything? And then I don't know what happened. Did we grow more individual or individualistic? Or?
Indeed, there was this thing of like, they talk about this, and I've read about this more in context of where, like in North America, which is not to say that this only happened in North America, it was just that it was observable there. This this difference between Native Americans and the Europeans who moved there, the difference in how they viewed land. Like the Native Americans did not have this concept of that land can be bought and sold. Like they thought it was a joke. And when they were being told that, you buy it, so they thought, ha ha ha, who buys? Like land doesn't belong to anybody. So that was like so that's, I guess, commoning, even though the tribes did have their territories, but they acknowledged that the resources stretch beyond them. Like even though they own a part of the territory, this resource is a part of a much bigger web.
Oh, yeah.
However, in this more gestalt way of reasoning, where you separate things out, an individual owns things, and then there are very clear boundaries, at some point of time, you also stop seeing how this thing belongs to a bigger web of things as well. I don't know if it's a consequence of, or if it's a convenient thing to do. I don't know. And I guess that moves you away from when your wealth starts being counted in the number of things that you own. Then of course that's what you're going to aspire towards as well, right?
Right.
So
it's a very sad development.
It is, although I think we are learning to, at least, like, we are having this conversation at least now. I don't know if somebody would be having this conversation, I don't know, 70 years ago, or in even 1970s or 80s, when, who was it, the nephew of Freud? He was teaching the world to desire things with advertisement, when cigarettes were made popular, and, all this like marketing then, of 80s, was it? Mad Men, that scene.
Can I ask you one thing?
Yes.
Okay, going back to the example of the cars, and in general of sharing, I come from a town where everyone has his own car, and if you tell them that they can share their car, they will look at you with a very bad face, because they are used to have every person his own car, with the family, even 2 or 3 with a motorbike and stuff. So in your opinion, how can we, and on the other hand, you are used to this now, this other habit. So in your opinion, how can we change the mindset of the people, or help them to understand the logical of sharing and get into this, even though they are so mindset to this other way to use things?
Right. I think that's a really good question, and I think it's also not a trivial question, because this is like, how does change happen? How does persuasion happen? And there are millions of dollars being spent around the world to just find that out, so that we can persuade people to buy more things. But one thing that comes to mind is, and there was there's this book called Rules for Radicals, which is written as a manual for young people on revolution, how you can, and this was written by an American guy for American youngsters in the 70s. And he says the first thing is, to make change happen, you first have to make change seem harmless. Like if you stand on the left and you scream like this crazy person, like, and then you're like, you are wrong, you don't know, this is not the right way to go. Like people are going like, okay, so this person is crazy, let's just go over to the other side, whether you prescribe to that side or not, but you just feel safer there because they're not screaming at you. So he says the first thing is that you have to make it seem like change is normal. And a part of doing that is, for example, I think pilots can help with that a lot. So for example, we are here when we started with this car sharing. It was 2 families sharing 1 car. Then when we joined, and then my husband helped a lot with that. There are 3 people who are on the board now. It's a non-profit organization. And now I think we are like 15 or 20 families within a year, because other people saw that, oh, this works. So it's also like feeling safe with something. Like, oh, this, since these 5 people, they seem to be on still good terms with each other. The cars are not all torn apart. So, it helps. And the third part of it is setting systems in place, and that comes with learning. So I almost feel that it's important for a movement to actually begin very small so that they can actually learn and become resilient rather than becoming too big too soon. Because, for example, you have to figure out really small things. How are we going to reserve a car? How are we going to do the accounting? Who's going to do the accounting? How are we going to transfer money to each other? How does the insurance work? These are very practical things that would be a concern to any new driver. And if you figure this out with 5 people, you can tell 20 other people that, guys, this works because here is our system in place. If you directly go to 20 people and say, guys, start sharing, but we don't have a system in place, it's going to be chaos. And then people lose faith in the idea instead of understanding that the system is not mature enough. So at least these are a few things that I've seen, like, that can help make change happen. And I asked this question a lot myself as well. But this is as far as I got with this. I don't know if that helps you.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Yeah, I think it's a very long process to be accomplished by an entire population of a country, but yeah, we are moving forward.
Yes,
slowly.
Indeed. And I see that there are many more initiatives now, especially in cities. In Netherlands, like, there are, I think, in the last 1 year, there are around 3 or 4 different companies that have started car sharing, while a few years ago it was maybe 1 or 2 at max. So I do think it's going, because also there's this thing of, they say, compounding, that for a long time you don't see change, and then suddenly it hits a critical mass, and then there's a huge change. So it's also staying persistent with these little incremental things until there is actually a big change as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sarah.
So another point would maybe be, setting up the system, but also making sure that the system is easy to use, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So that people don't,
yes.
aren't too frightened about it.
Indeed. And you learn that from the community. So, like, we meet once every month, and then people say, I don't know, I feel too lazy to do X, or, so it's like you do things based on what everybody finds okay as well, because it's for everybody.
Right.
So
that's an excellent idea. I mean, I live like 15 kilometers outside of Copenhagen, and we also have 1 car for the family, which, I mean, we shouldn't even have, because, I mean, I'm looking out at the parking space. I live in like a townhouse complex, and there's like, I can see 25 cars right here just sitting there. Right? And why not, share them? But then again, I'm kind of scared too. I mean, I wouldn't want to borrow a neighbor's car without having a system of, insurance and security.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Because what if I wreck their car and they're going to hate me forever, or they're going to burn down my house?
Right. Yes. And there is and that practical aspect is really important, because for example, this car sharing program, I see my husband talking to n number of different companies to say, this is the setup we have, and we need insurance, and there isn't a system in place right now. So insurance companies also need to grow with this.
Yes.
So talking about systems, right, it would need to go beyond this group of 20 people, and a company that serves thousands of people needs to change something in their policy as well.
But that's amazing. I mean, that's amazing that one person can make such a huge change, because that would be insurance policies globally, right?
At least it would, I think sometimes these things stay within a country, and they become big within a country. But sometimes, companies do learn from each other as well, saying that it's been done there, so we can do it here.
I mean, there's car sharing everywhere, right?
Indeed.
At least 3, 4, 5 different sharing.
Right. Indeed. Yes.
Great. Well, good for you. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's nice. I was anyways never a fan of driving, so It took me a long time to get a license, like I failed 4 times or something.
Oh, really?
In Netherlands, it's really hard to get a license. So, yeah.
I'm not a fan of creating pollution, but I do. We have a hybrid car now, at least.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Small changes, right?
Indeed.
That's really good, though. First, to make it seem harmless and normal. That's a really good tip to have, I think. And then setting up a system.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff. Anybody have any more questions? No. Do you want to talk more about listening? So you said you've written a bunch of articles. So do you do a lot of research before you do a workshop?
Yes, a lot.
Yeah.
Yes, because as I said, I teach things I want to learn. So it's like if my curiosity is not, if I don't feel like, oh, this is great, then I'm not going to talk about it. Because,
right.
you know,
that's what I do with the conference.
Exactly. So like it has to be, and also I try to stay away from talking about just introductory things, like, you know, basic things. I want to talk about concepts which may not be like in books for user research, which come from other fields. Like that's because a lot of it is to satiate my own curiosity for learning as well. Mm-hmm. So then usually, yeah, I read a lot of different books. For example, for this one of my go-to books was You Are Not Listening by Kate Murphy, which is an excellent book.
Okay.
Like, I think it's because she looks at listening from all sorts of perspectives, and she talks to different people. So that was like the starting point for me. And then based on that, I read a lot of other articles and books as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so yes, because I'm looking for things that are specific techniques, which we can, the other part of it is experiential learning. Rather than just knowing a thing, I want people to experience a thing so that you learn more. Yeah. Because also I like basing things on research. So I read How Do You Become an Expert? There's this book from, actually he was a Scandinavian researcher who wrote Secrets from the Science of Expertise, PEAK, it's called, that book. And he talked about this technique of deliberate learning. So if you know Malcolm Gladwell, he talks about these 10,000 hours, right? No. Or like in Outliers, like how do people become experts? So he talked about these 10,000 hours. So that was based. Sorry, yes. So that was based on this guy's work, and he also says how Malcolm Gladwell misinterpreted it. Like the 10,000 hours wasn't the point. The point was the system you use to learn. So I try to frame the workshops around that framework of learning as well, around these deliberate learning practices.
Yeah. I'm reading a really interesting book right now called Evolving Your Brain by Joe Dispenza. Okay. I think he's a chiropractor, and he was in a really bad accident when he was in his early 20s, and he broke his back, I think in 3 different places or even more.
Okay.
And healed himself by thinking.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And, you know, he talks, it's a very heavy book. It's like, I often have to rewind because I'm listening to it in an ebook and have to hear the things again. But he talks a lot about how it's repetition and, you know, creating the actual connections between the brain cells is repetition. And he also said something really interesting, which was, so semantic learning is one thing. You can read something and learn from it, but adding experiencing the thing with it, that actually creates wisdom. I thought that was such a good thing to say. So yes. It is super important to combine, you know, actually trying something.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Just yesterday, I learned this concept, which I love. I like sometimes you learn a concept and you're like, this is what I've been looking for so far. Yeah. So it was a difference between success, mastery, and perfectionism.
Okay.
And success is it working out, like, you know, it worked out under certain circumstances. So you were successful at doing it. Perfectionism, they say, is more about the perception of how you're perceived, rather than, you know, it doesn't have much to do with, you know, it has more to do with your concern with how others are going to perceive your work.
Oh.
And mastery is about being able to replicate things. So you are able to replicate a success. Right. And for that, you also need to know what doesn't work. So you're able to say, so this is when it works and this is when it doesn't. So talking to wisdom, so I think wisdom and mastery would probably go together, because if you've experienced it and tried it a number of times, you would say, okay, so in this context it seems to work, in this one not. And if I want it to work every time, then this is what I need to do.
Yeah. So actually to master something, you have to have failed in experiencing
Exactly.
it.
Exactly.
That's super interesting.
Yes. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. What is that from a book also?
This was actually, this website Brain Pickings by Maria Popova. So there was an article, but I can look up the article.
Thank you.
I'm reading this because for UX Insight, which is also, probably of the sister conference here, which I also help organize, and I'm a writer for them. I'm going to do, the next topic is going to be learning from failure. So that's why I'm doing the research on that right now.
Yes.
So I'm going to do a workshop on learning from failure.
Yes, we have a talk proposal for that. I hope she comes to UX Copenhagen this year.
Oh, yeah, okay. That's great.
Young woman, actually, is she from Brazil? No, she's from Colombia.
Okay.
And she wrote, we had this chat about how she's always been an A student all her life, always pleasing her family, always, and then, always perfecting things, doing things absolutely perfectly. And then she started doing her PhD, and she realized, like halfway through, she was so frustrated, and she realized it was because you cannot make a PhD perfect, because it's all about failure. And it's all about, researching something and failing at it, and then researching something else and failing at it. So she has like a whole talk about that. I really hope we get to present that. Yeah.
That would be a really interesting topic. Yes.
And when you're young, you're really scared of failing. I've been very scared of failing. I've been very scared of, losing face or failing. And now I'm like, oh, well, okay. I get up again, brush myself off. I've done it a million times. We'll be okay. But it takes wisdom, or it takes age, I think, also.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I agree. Yes. Yeah, indeed.
That's really interesting. So you're actually you organizing a conference?
Yes, so in the last 2 years, in the first 2 years, so I've been with UX Insight for 4 years now. The first 2 years I was in the program committee. And then the last year I was a writer. And then this year also I'm a writer, and I'll give a workshop. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yes, I enjoy it. It's a nice way to be engaged with the community.
That's great. Let me know if you need any help.
Thank you so much.
You bet. Okay, do we have any last minute questions? No, not that many people are left. It's also, I don't know if the time has anything to do with it, but this is the first time I've done a talk in the day, during the daytime. So it's very interesting. So I will publish this to our YouTube channel, the UX Copenhagen YouTube channel. Right. And I will, anybody who signed up for a ticket will get an email with a bunch of links to all the books that we talked about, and articles, whatever. And as I said, we will be taking a break with the conversations until after the holidays. So we'll be back in January. And you can all look forward to seeing Beant Kaur at the UX Copenhagen 2021 conference with her awesome workshop. I think it's going to be fantastic.
Yes, it's going to be a pleasure to see all of you there.
Yeah. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Heather, for having me. This is the first interview I've done.
Is the first interview you've done?
I think so. At least recorded interview. It's really interesting.
Yeah. It's really fun, I think. I started these conversations in September because I realized that, the first conversation I was having with people was just so much fun. And why not share that knowledge, right? Because how many different ways this conversation went. I mean, we've been talking about, so many different things. Yeah.
Definitely. Indeed.
So I think it's fun. I really enjoy it. And, may as well share it if it's something fun, right?
Yes. And I learned new things, like the term for commoning.
I don't know if it's a term.
Well, we can make it so.
We can make it.
Right.
Cool.
Okay.
Very cool. Take good care, and we will talk soon. If you have any questions, please reach out.
Yes.
And everybody, happy holidays and take good care.